Hey guys, it's Mary and welcome back to Study Journey. Welcome back to the Python series. This is episode 8 of the Hangman series, and in the last episode we talked about user input requirements and the first one, which is what you should do if it is not an alphabet. Now in this episode we're going to be talking about what we should do if the user guesses a repeated guess. Without further ado, let's get on with the video. Last episode, we talked about the first part of the user input requirements where we determined whether or not it was an invalid input by saying if it was not an alphabet, we subtracted one guess. Now we're going to do the second part. So I'm going to open CS Practice and then Hangman Files to open the instructions. So in the instructions, as we can see, here are the user input requirements, which is what we were doing. If we keep on scrolling down, we can see that it says, each time they guess an invalid letter or letter they have not guessed, they should lose a warning. We have done the first part, which is if they enter an invalid input. So now I'm going to go to my Finder, and I'm going to open the Hangman episodes, which is where I put all of my code. And I'm going to open up the instructions, and we're going to compare what we have right here. So right here, this is what would happen if it was not an alphabet. Now we have to determine what would happen if we have a repeated guess or if they guess a letter that they have already guessed. So if they do this, then they're going to subtract a letter. So let's see where in our Hangman game are we going to implement this. So as we start off in the beginning, it tells you the remaining warnings you have left, and then if the remaining guesses is greater than 0, you're going to print out how many remaining guesses and then the available letters, and then we're going to get their input of the letter. So if it is not a letter, we have the not alpha warning function. Otherwise, we will implement this. So this is if they don't guess a letter, so else is if they do guess a letter. And underneath this is where we're going to write what will happen if they guess the same letter. However, what they guess is already a letter, so it is going to be in the second section. So if the letter guessed, so if is letters guessed, and then with the parameter of the current guess, and then the letters guessed. What this means is if the current guess is in the letters guessed, which means we have already guessed it, and then you guessed it again, that means there is a repeated guess. If there is a repeated guess, then we implement this. So this is going to be really similar to what we had before right here with the not alpha warning, but it is just going to be basically repeated guess warning. So before this, we're going to write another function. We're going to define repeated guess warning. And then because we're going to be updating the remaining warnings and remaining guesses just like before, we're going to copy this over because what we have inside of this function is going to be the same. So the input is going to be the same. If this happens, then we are basically going to do the same thing as above right here. So I can copy this over and then just change it as necessary. So if there are no remaining warnings left, then we're going to start subtracting the remaining guesses. And otherwise, we're going to subtract the remaining warnings and say you have this many warnings left, and then you get the guess word. So basically this function is the same as this function, except we are just changing the name of it. Now that we have the name of this, we can just do as we did above right here and print that down and then copy what we have to update. So we're updating the remaining warnings and then the remaining guesses, because up here we have to return the remaining warnings and remaining guesses. So if we implement this function, it will return these. And for our main function to retain what we printed back, we have to let it equal what we had right here. Now if this happens, then this will happen. Otherwise, we're going to implement what we have down here. So remember to indent right here and then print else on the same indentation as the if, and then we're going to indent everything else 1 in, and then command S to save, and then we're going to open our terminal. I'm going to clear my screen. It's already in CS Practice. To open up my file that is in CS Practice, we have to say Python 3 and then Hangman episodes.py, it gives us how many warnings left, how many guesses left, and we're going to guess a letter. So A is in it. So if we guess it again, it says, oops, that is not a valid letter. And is this what we're supposed to say? It is supposed to say, if we scroll down and see, it's supposed to say you've already guessed that letter. So we're going to change what we say in our function so it actually matches what the function does. So if there is a repeated guess, it is a valid letter, but you have already guessed it. So you're going to say, oops, you've already guessed that letter. And we're going to do the same above here. Now we're going to save it and then rerun this function. So if I guess A twice, oops, you've already guessed that letter. You have 2 warnings left, and it starts subtracting. So once we have no warnings left, if we guess another repeated letter, it's going to say you have 5 guesses left. And then now we can see what will happen if we guess something that is not a letter. So now it also runs the not alpha warning. So if it is not an alphabet or if it is a repeated guess, it will both subtract either 1 warning, or when there are no warnings left, it's going to start subtracting guesses. So I'm going to scroll down to the example game to see if we are doing this right. So it should load the game, and we have not finished everything, but I just wanted to see if what we have right here so far is correct. So by the time it says you have 0 warnings left, after there are no warnings left, it should say, oops, you've already guessed that letter, and then you have no warnings left, so you lose 1 guess. And then it gives you how many guesses left. So we're going to update what we have up here. So if remaining warnings is equal to 0, right now this is the same as what we will print out if we had remaining warnings. So right here, instead of saying you have 0 warnings left each time, because this will only happen if we have 0 warnings. So instead of saying this, we're going to say you have no warnings left, so you lose 1 guess, and then print the word. So we're going to keep this the same, but we're going to change this to you have no warnings left, so you lose 1 guess. And then we're going to close the quotes. And then we're going to do the same to the repeated guess warning. So instead of saying you have 0 warnings left each time, we're going to say you have no warnings left, so you lose 1 guess, and then it will update the guess. So I'm going to command S save this and then run it again. Okay, you have 3 warnings left, you have 6 guesses left. I guess a letter, and then I guess it multiple times until I have no warnings left. Now what will happen if I guess it again? It should say, oops, you've already guessed that letter, you have no warnings left, so you lose 1 guess. And let's see what will happen if I guess a number. It says that is not a valid letter, you have no warnings left, so you lose 1 guess. Okay, so now that this is correct, we can see that this looks identical to what we have over here in their test function, and we can always update this as we go. So this for right now is exactly the same for what it should be after the user input requirements. So in this episode, we have finished up the user input requirements, and in the next episode, we will go on to game rules. Alright guys, that is going to be it for today's video. We talked about user input requirements, and we finished it off by talking about what we should do if there is a repeated guess. And in the next episode, we're going to be moving on to game rules. I hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.